Welcome, everyone, and let's get started. My name is Nat at Exceptional Individuals. We're a social enterprise that supports neurodivergent individuals succeed. That's the aim anyway. What we are going to be looking at today is disclosure. Woo! This is about telling everyone your dirty, dark secret. Joke, it shouldn't be that much of a big deal. We should be just like, hey, I've got dyslexia. No biggie. But as we know, it is a biggie in certain circumstances. I have dyslexia, dyspraxia, and on the autistic spectrum. Do I always disclose? No. It depends the type of organization, depends how I'm feeling, depends what support I'm looking for. However, there are a lot of benefits. April's been on all the webinars so far. Nice, brilliant. We are talking today about dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism, ADHD. That essentially is neurodivergence. It's when the brain thinks significantly different to the majority of the population. And as a result, there may be some unintended consequences to how you navigate the neurotypical world around you. That is what we're going to be talking about. Why our brains might think a bit different and why we might need or want to tell someone in a professional environment that we think a little bit different. Heads up again, I've done this before. I use a lot of GIFs and a lot of them are office related because neurodiversity in the workplace, office, there was a link there and I ran with it. Disclosure of neurodivergence at work. It is a big subject and honestly, we can only touch the tip of the iceberg today. I'm going to guess that a lot of you are neurodivergent. If you're not, tell me why you're here. Do you support people? Do you have family who are? Or if you are, let me know what you've got under the hood if you feel comfortable in telling me. Obviously, today is a safe environment. We're going to be looking at disclosure. We're going to be looking at some myths and some facts. We're going to be looking at some challenges, some stigma, what to do after you've disclosed, a couple of tips. We're going to be looking at it from your perspective, from your colleague's perspective, and your manager's perspective, because wearing multiple hats might help you have a bit more empathy, just like we're hoping others will have for us, and also some other tips, directions to go into. Oh, nice. Yes. Anna actually uses the chapters. Great. It's good to know that we're not just doing them for the sake of it. It's great that they're useful. What is neurodiversity? This is your bare necessities. We're looking at describing a range of brain differences, ADHD, autism, dyslexia, and more. Differences is the key word here. We're not saying negative. We're not saying a deficit. We're not saying a disability. We're just saying different. Different, though, is difficult in a world which was created for the typical. And as such, adjustments might be required. And that is exactly what we're going to be looking in today. What can we do to make our life easier without throwing any shade or stigma to ourselves? Because again, a difference can be an amazing thing. You do have to, however, have the right foundations in order to get those benefits out. Oh, Angela says we've got a light diagnosis here, ADHD with strong ASD and dyspraxia traits. Great to have you. Let's start off with, how familiar are you with the term neurodivergence? Never heard of it? Can't heard of it, don't really know what it means, or pro by now. You know what it is, you feel comfortable. Okay, nice. Most people understand it. That is a great place. No one doesn't, but just for those of you who do not know, neurodivergence is the umbrella term. While dyslexia and autism can be very different from each other, they would still count as neurodivergence. Considering all of you have said that you are very familiar with it, the next question should be a walk in the park. Name some ND conditions that you are aware of. Okay, just throw them out there. I want to get a comprehensive list. Yeah, ADHD, basic, give us some more. Name every one that you can possibly think of. This term isn't concrete, by the way. Is there a definitive list? No, but there are some that are genuinely considered to be. Think of any condition which isn't necessarily a disability, but can be disabling by society. Nice, we've got some dyscalculia, which is roundabout maths, dyslexia, reading, attention, dyspraxia, movement and speech. We've got bipolar, obsessive compulsive disorder. Irene's nice. Keep it OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. Okay, anyone else? Yeah, attention deficit disorder, ADD. No Tourette's yet? Okay, yeah, there's loads. If we're going, for instance, even behavioral disorder is one. Different types of attention. You could argue a lot more things are, to be honest, but these are your basics. Yes. Dyspraxia, alexia, global development disorder, there's many more. but these are the ones that you're likely to come across in a day-to-day work environment. Which of these benefit most from disclosure? First of all, we need to ask the question, what's the point of disclosing? Not how to disclose, but why would we want to do it anyway? Are we disclosing for safety? Are we doing it for having those beautiful accommodations? Or are we doing it for those lovely team dynamics? Okay, going up and down. Believe it or not, safety still is one. Because let's say you've got dyspraxia and you're a bit all over the place. Having people aware that you might struggle with coordination skills in certain environments is definitely going to be a plus. Let's say you've got quite strong dyslexia and you really struggle with reading and writing. If you're not able to read the health and safety stuff, you could have danger. Or if someone is verbally telling you safety instructions and you have autism and there's a likelihood that you might misunderstand. Accommodations, you are legally entitled, in the UK at least, and most countries, most Western countries, to have reasonable adjustments if you are neurodivergent. But there's a caveat. You can only get those adjustments if it is made aware of, if they know about it. You can't say, if only I had that, if it was never mentioned. Team dynamics, if your team understand how your brain works, they can work with it rather than against it. Because one thing that I see time and time again is the clash of titans, how one brain type and another brain type not quite gelling. And that's normally due to lack of understanding. Okay, we've also got safety and mental and emotional regulation perspective. Absolutely. Tim says danger avoidance can also be very high or low with ND, particularly ASD. Yes, that's very true. Tim, I'd say you're probably more of the avoidance, where I'm definitely pro. Can you disclose to HR and to management, but still request no disclosure to peers? Yes, you can. But you do have to make it very fair. For instance, your manager might be aware, but they don't tell the whole team. It's not something they keep lock and key, they'll take to their grave, but there's no reason for them to tell anyone. You can do, but I think you do have to make it very clear because this isn't a hard and fast rule. Normally HR will say, and they'll talk to people of the same seniority or level as them, unless you specify. With most things though, it's only confidential up to a point. Let's say you have depression, you tell them you have depression, and they think there's a real risk to your well-being, then they might tell someone else. But with neurodivergence, not normally the case. A good question. Okay, what I want to do is describe a challenge you think could arise from disclosure. This one is a useful thing to ask us because if it was simple just to tell people, hey, I've got this, why would we even be doing this webinar today? We have to understand the context and the background as to why people are definitely not okay or comfortable with just telling it. Oh, the word discrimination is popping up a lot. Discrimination in the workplace. Sounds a rap there. Unconscious bias around ability. We've got judgment from others, negative bias, discrimination. There's a lot of things here. If I could told you there was even a tiny chance that you might be discriminated against or you'd have judgment or shade or stigma, why would you do it? Why would you possibly want to disclose if everyone here is basically saying the same thing? Sometimes you've got to ask yourself, is it worth the risk? The benefits, do they outweigh the negatives? That is case by case. And we need to give you the right tools in order to make that decision. Truthfully, in the right situation, disclosure could be a godsend and it can take a massive weight off your shoulders and it can give you the support, encouragement you need. But in the wrong situations, it might hinder progression opportunities. It might make people look at you different. So we need to find the right balance. Oh, Stefan says, hope that maybe it will be different this time. Yeah, I think we do that a lot of the time. You have a bad experience and this time I can't get unlucky again, can I? It is possible. We're going to look into it. What I want you to do is arrange these steps for disclosure in order of importance. So these 4 key steps are what we typically do in order to go through the process. Some may be more important than others. We've got prepare. How much prep are you doing? Or are you literally just going head in and say, hey, I got dyslexia, and then run away? We've got consult. Are you talking with anyone beforehand? Are you making sure that you've thought about it properly? Officially disclose? Are you making this just a, hey, just so you know, I've got ADHD? Or is it something that you're having actually documented? Next, the follow-up. Because if you just tell someone you got autism and wish them a good day, it's just a token gesture. It doesn't mean anything. Let's see what we got here. Number one, prepare. Prepare is important. If you just rush in there and say, I've got ADHD, what do you want me to do about it? You have to know what you want. Having ADHD, for example, is okay, but the next steps is what's really important. Okay, Clara says, sometimes you get to the edge of your capacity. Disclosing might stop possible bad consequences or unrealistic expectation. Yeah, that's really true. Yes, before you get burnt out. That is exactly why. Please don't think I'm discouraging any of you from disclosing. I just want everyone to have the facts beforehand. Then we've got a bit of consult. Speak to someone. Know your rights. For instance, the question about if I tell HR, are they allowed to tell my team? Ask that beforehand. Tell you I'm autistic. Would you perhaps tell my team? It doesn't have to be as subtle as that, but just know the facts. Officially disclose. This is another big one. If you just tell someone, it doesn't count as officially disclosing. You need it on record, and that will allow you to have the support and be covered under the Equality Act. Otherwise, it's just your word against their word. I know it can be a bit scary to make this an official process, but if it's officially on record, you are then covered. The last one, which a lot of you put follow up, not important. It's really important, because why would you tell someone you have something for no reason? If there's a risk of you being discriminated against or judged, why bother telling someone? But if we go back to what some of your comments said, is, for instance, you'd avoid getting support, benefits, there's more realistic expectations, just to avoid you getting burnt out. Those are the things that we want as a result of it. If you want assistive technology, if you want different adjustments, this is what you then have to push for. I told you I am this, you are now required to do this. Okay, we got all fired up, incompetence, or not being a team player enough. Yes, that is sometimes what people say. Tim says some people mention it in passing on their CVs. There is proof that they mentioned it, and there is an opening for the interview stage. I know, Tim, you did the sessions week on CVs. Whether or not you should put it on your CV, personally, I would say no. The reason for this is the vast majority of people aren't that educated when it comes to neurodivergence. I would rather be the person in the driver's seat telling them what it means for me and the benefits that are attached to my dyslexia. But if I just put it on a CV, they're using their noggin, which might be a bit out of date, not quite the latest operating system, and coming up with all these preconceived ideas on what they think it is. But you are right, Tim. By having it in writing, you're good. It does cover you. Oh, new question. Are there any legal protections for self-diagnosed people? This is a very good question. It gets a bit complicated. Under the Equality Act 2010, you are covered if you are neurodivergent, dyslexic, dyspraxic, autistic, etc. But if you actually read the Equality Act, it's not mentioned. How can it be covered and not mentioned? This is when we look in previous tribunals and previous records when things have gone to court for discrimination. When any neurodivergent one has gone, they have typically sided with, yes, you are covered. It's asterisks. If you say, I resonate or I protect, then yes, because you can't prove otherwise. It's saying, I'm Christian. Okay, let's see your christening. Let's see your documentation. People can't do that. It's how you feel. Yes, you are protected if you believe that you have been discriminated against for a particular reason. Whether or not you have autism, if you feel someone had discriminated against you for autism, you'd be covered. As to reasonable adjustments, yes. But again, it's not black and white. Some bad organizations will require it where they are in the wrong for doing that. Let's do some fun true and false here. What should your employer do? Doesn't mean they're going to, but what should they do? You're legally required to disclose your neurodivergence when you start a new job. Is this true or false? Do you have to? Is it disclosed now or forever hold your peace? Or can you do it whenever? Employers are obliged to provide reasonable adjustments under the Equality Act. If you disclose, they have to do something. Disclosing neurodivergence can only have a negative impact on your career. Is it as black and white as that? It is illegal for employers to ask about your neurodivergence in an interview in the UK. If any of you aren't in the UK, do tell me if you know if this is different in your country. Always interesting to know. Lastly, you can choose to disclose your neurodivergence at any point during your employment. Okay, I can see we've got some mixed answers here. Not everyone agrees, which makes it interesting. We've got true, true, false, true, true. Let's break it down. You're legally required to disclose your neurodivergence when you start a job. Why is that a tick? Damn it. Okay, you are not. Forget that one. You are not legally required to disclose your neurodivergence when you start a job. Don't listen to these ticks. They don't know what they're on about. You do not have to. It is a complete optional choice. Employers are obliged to provide reasonable adjustments under the Equality Act. Yes, if they are aware that you have a protected characteristic, then they have to. There is, again, another little caveat here where if it is obvious you have a protected characteristic, let's say you're in a wheelchair, does the person in the wheelchair need to say that they're in a wheelchair? No. The reasonable adjustment should be applied. But when something is hidden, it's not as simple. If you argue that it's clearly obvious I've got something, then they do have to do something. This is why employers should offer it regardless. But you see things with dyslexia which are harder to spot. This is when it's definitely better for you to disclose, even though you're not required to. Disclosing neurodivergence can only have negative impacts. Absolutely false. There are a lot of benefits that can come as a result of it, but people are naturally scared of the negatives. It's legal for employees to ask your neurodivergence in an interview. Yeah, that's true. They aren't allowed to ask. So if they do ask you, that's a big no-no. You can tell them, but they can't ask you. They will, however, give you the opportunity. Is there anything you want me to know? If you want to disclose, you can feel free to do, but they can't outrightly ask you. We also got, you can choose to disclose your neurodivergence at any point during your employment. Completely true. Doesn't matter if it's today or 10 years later. When you disclose, if you disclose, that's when they have to give you the support. Oh, Tim says reasonable adjustments are protected, but a lot of required support goes beyond reasonable adjustment. Very true, Tim. Reasonable, that's only much, but most employers will go beyond reasonable, and that's when they might say, I need a bit more evidence. Emma says, what if you've mentioned it on your CV? Can they not ask then? That, I would say yes. Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say yeah, because you've mentioned it. It's saying, what's your favorite color? Can't talk about that. You've already mentioned it. Yeah. But it's mainly to avoid discrimination. For instance, if they look at you, think they're autistic, that is them using bias and discrimination. But if it says, I have autism and I see this as a benefit because, they might want to inquire about that. And hopefully it's in a very positive light. Or they may ask, are there any reasonable adjustments I can make that can best support you? Okay, are reasonable adjustments based on the employee count or income of the company? No, all companies of any shape and size are required to make reasonable adjustments. However, if you get reasonable adjustment grant via the access to work thing, then it is based on income or company count, depending on a few different factors. But regardless of whether or not they get a grant or not, they still have to make those adjustments. That's a mandatory. Next one, list some strengths associated with neurodivergence. Why is this important for disclosure? Let me tell you this. If you go up to someone and you tell them all the things you can't do, can you honestly expect them not to have some negativity or stigma towards you? People do. But if you go there, say, hey, I may well struggle with X, Y, Z. However, as a result of my neurodivergence, I can do ABC. It's not just necessarily about spinning, but it's about giving a three-dimensional image of what your neurodivergence means to you. As such, you do have to think about the benefits that is attached to it. For instance, your employer wants to see hyperfocus. They want to see attention to detail. They want great crisis management, great memory. They want great loyalty. They want you to be able to see the small details. All of these are amazing things, right? But they do not come for free. If you want access to them, you have to put the reasonable adjustments and create the right platform to allow these strengths to emerge. That's what I say with neurodivergence. You want all these amazing things that you might not necessarily get with your neurotypical employees? Great, but you have to make the adjustments. But we can only make those adjustments if we are aware of it. These are the things I'd go in. I say, oh, hi, I am a very great problem solver, very great creativity. I find a lot of these attributes can be related to my dyslexia, which I have. On that subject, these reasonable adjustments I have had in the past, or I believe would support me and allow me to really bring out these strengths. You can word it. If you go to someone with a problem with no solution, not the best approach. Go to them with a solution first, you get far better results. Because while all of us here are hopefully advocates or thinking differently and know the strengths, we're dealing with a lot of dinosaurs. So we do have to educate them first. Next one. What should the employee do first when disclosing neurodivergence at work yourself? What will be one of the first things that you do? Is it A, immediately tell all your colleagues in the team meeting, I'm autistic? You could tell them that way. B, post about it on social media, tagging the company, go on LinkedIn. OMG, can't believe I'm ADHD. Hashtag HSBC. Maybe. Or C, I know it was a bit rhyming there. Research company policies and identify the best person to disclose. Yep, that is the one. Research company policies, really important. Not all policies are the same. Do your research and do know the correct person. For some organizations, it may be your manager, your line manager. For a lot of organizations, it might be your HR. Smaller organizations may not have HR, so you've got to look for the right person. Otherwise, you might have to tell multiple people. Do your research first. The last one, which is submit an anonymous tip to HR. No, don't do that. I'm not saying who it is, but someone has dyspraxia. What am I going to do with that? Anna says, research possible adjustments and have them listed with explanations on how they help. Yes. If you go to someone saying, you know, this fancy bit of equipment, it costs £500. I need that. They're not going to that. But if you say, this is what it does, this is why it benefits me, this is why other software can't do the same thing. If I have this, this will improve my productivity. Just like anything in life, you have to build a case study as to why it would be relevant. I appreciate it's a fine line between having to fight for support and prove that you deserve it and just helping the business case. I think the key barrier here is if something is reasonable. Reasonable is a grey word. Who knows what it means? The definition I typically give is, will it put an organization at any disadvantage? Financial, will it put a big burden on them, or safety? That's when it might not be reasonable. But if it is possible and it can be done, then it should be done. And there are government grants available in order to cover the shortfall if it's too expensive for you. There really is no reason apart from safety why a reasonable adjustment should not be implemented. We got, maybe you can check if they have an ERG, an employment resource group, and try to speak to them too. Yes, if any of your organizations that are quite big have like an employee resource group or a community, some network, they will have all this information to hand. Unfortunately, a lot of organizations don't have these groups because you have to have a fair few members. Here are some tips for effective disclosure, how to do it right. On here, I want you to rank what is most important. First of all, you want to be exact. Why is that important? If you just say, I'm neurodivergent, what does it mean? If you just say, I have autism, autism is a massive spectrum. It could mean so many things. The diagnosis isn't important. It is the characteristics. It is the way that it affects you on a day-to-day. If you tell me you have autism, all right, maybe you're nonverbal, but you need to give the details. For instance, you may not even mention that you have dyslexia, but you might say, I struggle with comprehension and reading or having schedules. Explain what it means to you. Otherwise, they are just going to Google the first thing that comes up, or they're going to think about their cousin. And, oh yeah, I remember they have autism, and they're just going to come to some quick conclusion. We got choose the right time. Pick the right moment. If someone's busy, someone's stressed, you're not going to get the best outcome. Maybe pick your one-to-one, schedule the time, book it in. That is important. Though this isn't a must because you're right to say whenever you want, timing is key. And knowing your rights. A lot of employers, honestly, probably aren't that familiar with the Equality Act and will not know about the adjustments. You might disclose to them and they may be like, okay, cool. But you need to tell them, these are the benefits under the Equality Act, I know that I am entitled to reasonable adjustments, and I've done some research on the type of adjustments that I think could benefit me. This is really great. You came to them with some new information, then you showed them their legal obligation, and then you've done all the hard work for them. By giving them all the pieces of the puzzle, it makes it as smooth and streamlined as possible. If you literally say to them, I'm autistic, what are you going to do about it? They will do something, hopefully, but it will be slow and it will not be their priority. Managers, I don't think they go out their way to discriminate, but they are busy people. And I've honestly seen people being forgotten about, things that have taken 6-7 months in order to get anything done in place. There's a lot of instances where people failed their probation before they even had any support at all. And this is due to timing. Make it as simple and as straightforward as you possibly can do. Another concern that people often have, and as one of you mentioned earlier, is about privacy. Who's going to know? Where's this going to get publicized? Is this going to be plastered on the intranet? Is there going to be wanted signs? Who knows? Understanding these concerns can help us and when you choose to disclose neurodivergence. What are the main concerns about privacy? Where are they going to store the data? Who's going to have access to it? All right, let's say we've got a quick question here. If I want to disclose from start, would it be during my interview or after I accept the offer? This is another really good question. Honestly, you can disclose at any point. The benefit of disclosing before interview is that you might have those adjustments taken into consideration during the interview process. For instance, they may change the way you were interviewed. The downside is it may be taken into consideration, even if it's unconsciously, for whether or not you're a right fit. If you do it as soon as you've been accepted, the downside is you hadn't had the support early on. They also might feel a little bit, why didn't you mention this sooner? But it does mean that you got the job now and they can't take it back. It's a personal choice. I would say, as a personal answer, I would want my organization to be on board with it from the start. I wouldn't want to feel that I have to fight for acceptance. I would like it to be as soon as I join. I would mention it. And I mention it not as a consideration for what they need to do for me, as a benefit of what I can offer the organization. I always try to spin it while also acknowledging the challenges are also there. Okay, what are some privacy concerns? How it might be incorrectly used. Yeah, they might make decisions. And it's not always, for instance, I'm not going to hire that person or I'm not going to promote that person. It might mean that they choose not to give you certain types of work because they're trying to be inclusive, but actually you're completely fine with all types of work. Disclosure being passed on to third-party companies. I haven't heard of that, but it's definitely possible that maybe they give names or details. While we have things like GDPR, it doesn't mean that they're always followed to the book. Whether my colleagues need to know about my ND in order not to hate me, oh, that's a brutal one, but I do get it. Let's say you don't get on with your colleagues. If they then find out your neurodivergence, is this going to allow them to be a bit softer on you? Is this going to mean that they have to try and be nice? Do people change the way they treat you then? Ideally not, but it's a concern that hiring people, if more than one, will discuss it openly. It's possible. Colleagues feeling I have an advantage due to adjustments. Yep, that is another one. If people find out, they might think you have unfair treatment. One thing I'd say to organizations is that any adjustment that you make for a neurodiverse person, ideally you'd have open to the whole organization and it shouldn't be siloed out. But if your colleagues are aware, they might have greater understanding. It can go both ways. We've got a few comments here. I wasn't planning to disclose in an interview. I was asked what management style worked for me, and I thought it wasn't relevant. Didn't get the job, now wondering what's cost me the offer. Those things you'll never know unless you ask for feedback. They'll never admit it though. I do think though, you possibly could have used to your advantage when management style. Well, I don't know what you got. Let's say you got ADHD saying, due to my ADHD, I feel that I have this type of personality, which has benefited me in my management style. There's a way of disclosing without going straight into the areas that you might find more difficult. But with some things we'll never know. Anna says, companies have diversity/inclusion reports. Anonymous data will be included in these. Yeah, and that is another thing. The data will be included, but they won't be including your names, at least if they're doing their job correctly. I really can't emphasize a good organization. It will make no difference. If everyone knows you have dyslexic or not, it won't matter because there'll be people in senior positions have also spoken openly about it. A really great way to know if it's a safe place to disclose is to see, has anyone in a senior position also disclosed? How openly is it spoken about? Or are you going to be the first guinea pig in order to see how it runs? There's no shortage of neurodiverse people. There should be plenty of case examples. Would you be open to undergoing training to support neurodivergent colleagues? This question is aimed at colleagues. And this is a really important one because maybe some of you here aren't neurodiverse, and understanding whether other people are open to learning. I think it's probably unreasonable at this stage to expect everyone to have a great awareness, but it's definitely not unreasonable for everyone to want to learn and to be open. Having a gauge about the type of training that has already been offered might make you feel more comfortable and more prepared to openly talk about it. If I know an organization has been learning about neurodivergence, then yeah, I'll talk about it because I know they have already started the educational journey and I can continue that with them. But if I know that they haven't done training yet, they've been focusing on other areas, I could see why I might be a little bit more reluctant. Anna says again, I go myself because I know a lot about ADHD, but not as much on other NDs. Yeah, and I think that could be cool. The more you learn, the better. It's always, I always say, a 50-50 approach between you and your organization. While there's an assumption where they definitely should know about all these mental health conditions and neurodivergences and all of these other things, truthfully, it's unlikely. They need to have as much understanding as they possibly can, and you need to be able to fill in the blanks. They might know the overarching framework of the condition, but they won't know what it means for you as a person. You really do have to meet both ways. Do you mean running the training or attending? Yes, attending. This was aimed at colleagues. Remember, we're trying to put our different hats on, understanding what other people are thinking at the same time. All right, let's look at some legislation. Woo! Isn't that fun? What legislation protects neurodivergent individuals at work in the UK? I've mentioned this a dozen times. Fingers crossed you'll get it right. While there are many different acts which you could technically use or use to back up your point, the gold standard in the United Kingdom is the Equality Act 2010. 2010, because beforehand there were a few others and then they amalgamated, merged. The Equality Act, as I said, isn't directly related to neurodivergence. It's related to protected characteristics. It might mean sexuality, your religion, your age, anything which people discriminate against. This is really important right now. If I was to ask all of you, do you consider neurodivergence to be a disability? You may well say no, and you are completely right and entitled to say no if that's how you see it. But for it to be protected under the Equality Act, it is considered a disability. And a disability is a benefit. If you go to them and say, is not a disability for me, maybe, just maybe, they could say, I didn't have to do anything. But if you consider it to be a disabling factor, then they have to do something. Back to the question about if I self-diagnose, that doesn't matter. If you consider that there is a disabling factor to how your brain thinks compared to the others in your organization, then you would be covered. Sometimes it's semantics, it is tiny bits of wording. Under the Equality Act, I'm more than happy to be counted as disabled, but in a day-to-day, maybe not. We've also got, and in some countries, e.g. Poland, you have to have an actual disability assessment to get adjustments by law. Otherwise, it's a goodwill or an employer. See, that's really interesting. In the UK, that's not the case. That is something that you should ask anyway, because some policies might be out to date. But reasonable adjustments should be given regardless of any proof. There are, however, some things which having an official diagnosis may help. They may ask for it, and I think you're entitled to say, no, thank you. Like giving them your report might give them a little bit more context and able to help you. But this is why it's much better practice to have a workplace needs assessment rather than just give them your official diagnosis, because there might be way more confidential things in that official report than as to a work one. That's why I would probably choose. I personally wouldn't share my official diagnosis because it says way too many personal things. But my work one, that was co-edited with me where I could choose what was included and what was omitted to a certain extent. The legal obligations is individuals have the choice to disclose whether or not they're neurodivergent. If you do not disclose, you aren't shooting yourself in the foot. But an employer could say, you didn't disclose, I didn't have to do anything. But the second you disclose, they then have to be able to put adjustments in place. These adjustments, they could be anything. It could be additional time. It could be different software. It could be having different environments. You can't mandate that certain adjustments are delivered because it all depends on whether or not they consider it reasonable. Well, there has to be some acknowledgement and effort to make sure that you have been seen and heard and aren't just told. If you are telling an organization for the sake of telling them, why bother? If you are telling them and you know there are support available, then it could be beneficial. I say this because I've seen a few organizations that just wanted to get better statistics and numbers, and they weren't doing it actually to implement anything for those people who were to disclose. If there is a thing that asks you, it's always worthwhile to see what adjustments have they given people in the past. Is this disclosure, is it mutually beneficial, or does it only benefit one party? What do you reckon employers could do post-disclosure? And I can't emphasize this enough. Post-disclosure is just, if not more important than pre-disclosure. Once you have disclosed, what would you expect? What would you want to happen? Have they just put a little tick next to your name on their internal database? Have they already gotten the ball rolling for a workplace needs assessment? Have they scheduled a one-to-one meeting? Are they educating the team? Do you want this to be a big thing, or do you want this just to be one of those things? We've got educating colleagues. Nice. Hopefully they're not educating your colleagues just because you disclosed, because so many people are neurodivergent. They're hopefully educating everyone. We've got a range of reasonable adjustments. Yes, this is one of the biggest things about disclosing earlier. The earlier you disclose, the sooner you can get reasonable adjustments. This isn't a quick process. Getting these adjustments could take as little as a couple of weeks and as long as 7 or 8 months, honestly. The earlier you apply, the better. While an organization is required to make adjustments, as long as they can prove that those adjustments are in the pipeline, it's fine, even if that pipeline is excessively long. Educate themselves? Yep, absolutely. They go off and they learn more. Technological support? Yep, get HR, get the team on it straight away. Set up feedback sessions, look at what extra help might help, what help you have had previously, look into what they are able to do to make your life easier, be supportive, implement adjustments, quiet spaces, that your line manager takes it seriously, empathy and support, flexi working, time for medical appointments, listen. These are great things. All of them are completely reasonable, okay? No one has said anything here which are not going to happen. These are the type of things which you can expect. And I think if you tell them these are the things that you would expect, I am disclosing because I would like to see a bit more empathy, or I would love it if you could do some additional research. Rather than just say, learn some more about it, maybe there's some areas you can point them in the right direction. Maybe send them to these webinars, for instance. Give them some guidance. We've got follow-ups, some adjustments might need adjusting. Yes, that is true. Do not think just because you've had the adjustments when you first joined, you can't ask a month later or a year later. People change, jobs change. You're absolutely able to reevaluate. After 1 year of disclosing, you may have learned so much more about yourself. And as a result, you now want to talk to them again and say, actually, now I know more about myself. I'd like to update you on what I've learned. That can also be really useful. What if there's a disagreement over whether a role can be done effectively remotely? Remote working is a really sensitive subject at the moment. Many organizations are trying to force everyone back into the office. As neurodiverse people, we've often had adjustments about working remote or having flexible hours. But when the pandemic happened, everyone was sent off to work remotely. For some people, this really benefited. For others, it did not. But either way, people got used to it. Now we're being forced back into the office. You might say, actually, I work better in this environment. For an organization, this is very much depending upon your contract. And whether or not this is reasonable, I think depends on the job role. If they're saying there is a particular reason as to why you are working face to face, they could argue that is necessity. Honestly, this one is case by case. It's one that I'm struggling a lot with at the moment with a lot of other individuals. I wish I had a better answer for you for this one. But what you can do is, for instance, in a workplace needs assessment, while they can't mandate you get to work remotely, they can say why it would be beneficial and they can state your case. While you should hope that you can say, I work better in this way, by having an external professional, it can often add a little bit more weight or gravitas to it. Oh yeah, Anna says some of the other things you can ask for include a separate room or screen dividers to reduce visual glare and distractions. Absolutely. Oh, we've got, when I disclosed my ADHD, my manager sent me to occupational health. Occupational health spoke to me for about 10 minutes and told me I was not qualified for accommodations. Since then, any support at work has been best superficial. I still feel occupational health doctors did me the dirty by signaling to my workplace they had no legal obligation with me. That's a tough one because occupational health and a workplace needs assessment are different. I would say go for both. The only problem with occupational health is they are employed by the organization. They can be more biased. I'm sorry that you went through that though, honestly. What do you reckon is the most effective form of self-advocacy? And self-advocacy is when you talk about yourself, when you say, you know what, I want support, I need support, there are benefits, because this has to be on your side as well as theirs. We've got being vocal in meetings, sending written requests to HR, posting about issues on company intranet, utilizing company suggestion boxes. The most effective way of doing this by far is B, okay? Sending written requests to HR. This is the best one. If you're being vocal, people hear you, but it's not official. It has to be in writing. Otherwise, they could argue against it. For you to be covered, it has to be official. Please do make sure that if, say, later down the line, you're saying, I told you I had autism and you did nothing about it, they could easily say, I forgot, or I don't remember it, or they moved out of organization. But if it's written down, at least you have something you can refer back to, either via email or their intranet. Yes, do it in writing if you're able to. I would pass it to all of you about, do you have any resources or recommendations or suggestions when it comes to disclosure? Are there any things that I mentioned that you disagree with? Or are there any things that I didn't mention and you think actually could be quite useful? Or do any of you have any personal stories or interesting anecdote that you're able to share? What have we got here? Gail says trade unions are useful. Yes, if you have access to trade unions, they have your best interests at heart. While they might be biased in practice, as the person commented, I did learn they are bound by ethics and medical professionals. Are you talking about occupational therapists? As such, I would advise people to test them, e.g. ask, what is the purpose of this assessment? What are your obligations? Yes, and please don't think that occupational therapists are bad. They are not. I'm just saying they might have other things, but you can ask them, remind them of their obligations. When you're talking about how things affect you, don't just talk about how they are affecting you right now. Talk about how they have affected you on your worst day over 6 months. Give them context on a day-to-day rather than just say, yeah, I have autism. It's not that big of a deal. Talk to them about what it can be on a day that you're really struggling, because those are the days that you might need the adjustments more. Thank you. Okay, we got, when I was HR for a very small business, literally just coming to speak to me was all it took for me to implement adjustments, find an ally. We've talked a lot today about worst case scenarios. A good organization will do it with no trouble. Do your research, find an ally, speak to people. It really doesn't have to be this evil thing. There are many organizations which actively support people who are neurodiverse, go out of their way for it. Telling you where to find those companies, maybe that's a talk for another day, but I appreciate it. Okay, we've got unions, INDP, occupational health, the law, but I will still refuse adjustments. Sorry about that. Some other areas that I would recommend to some of you is CAS, the Advisory, Conciliation and Arbitration Service. Why do they make these names long? Offers free advice on employers' right, including neurodivergence. This is a good place to go for free support. Then we've got the National Autistic Society. They give autism guidelines. I've had mixed luck with some of these organizations, to be honest with you. However, if you're able to find some documentation or official notes, they can be a really good starting place to show what best practice is. So you can say, the British Dyslexia Organization recommends that these things could be beneficial. Then you're not just throwing your opinions, you're giving a little bit additional weight. We also got the ADHD Foundation, the Equality Act 2010. I often find that I have to prove to people that I am covered. They may say things, but if you actually have the legislation to hand or you've highlighted some key areas, while I hope you never have to use it, it can often make you feel a lot more confident about disclosure. You go in there fully prepared. Best case scenario, people you have an ally, not a big issue. Worst case, you have all the information to hand. Mind is also a really good organization. They focus on mental health, but as we've learned many times before, neurodivergent and mental health have a very close relationship. And a couple of books, which I think are a really good place to start reading if you have the time. Neurodiversity at Work by Amanda Kirby. She's quite big in the field, would recommend. Also, Divergent Mind. Those books I found very useful when I wanted to learn a little bit more about how my brain works in a workplace and the different nuances that come with it. Oh, you've got Unmasked Autism by Devon Price. Yes, not talking just about autism. That's really cool. I have heard of that one. Any other books or any recommendations, always feel free to share. Some key takeaways. If you were to remember anything I said today, these are the points I want to leave you with. Do your research. Know the company's policies on disabilities and accommodations. Rather than always resorting to what legally they're obliged to do, if it's already in their policies, it's much easier. And at least you know you're at a company with the right values. Identifying the right person, be it manager or HR. If you know who to talk to first, it might save the effort of having to go through a long process and telling more people than necessarily need to know. Choose time wisely, make it private, uninterrupted, make sure there's enough space, it's not rushed. It could be quite an emotional process. I've seen many times where people have disclosed to me and have actually broke down on tears because they're sharing a lot of emotional baggage. Make sure that you've got that time to breathe should you need it. Be clear. No point just saying you got ADHD, have a good day. Tell them what it means for you and the adjustments that you'd be looking for. Keep record. It's got to be in documentation. Otherwise, you're not really covered. Make sure it's easily accessible. Make sure you have a copy and the manager or HR. Be familiar with the Equality Act. I'm not saying all of you need to be able to quote it off by heart, but at least knowing the key takeaways. What's covered, what's not covered, what's a recommendation, and what's a necessity. Be open to dialogue. Be fully prepared that your manager or HR person isn't going to be an expert and they probably have a lot of questions. Honestly, they probably want to learn. Have some answers. I'm not saying you need to know everything in the world about autism, but at least if you understand what it means for you, then that would create a really good foundation for you to build that rapport up and that allyship. Last one, follow-ups. Okay, we've got fab advice. Thanks again. Great session. If any of you are neurodivergent and employed, do get a workplace needs assessment, even if you feel that you don't currently need the support, because having it in advance can be really useful. If any of you are looking for jobs, unfortunately, this isn't available for you, but what you can do is when you are disclosing, let's say it's autism or dyslexia, just to let you know, I have autism or I have dyslexia. However, there are assessment and grants available, which means I can get support. Would I be able to apply for it if offered the job? They have to say yes, but if you ask them, then it feels everyone's on an equal footing. You're also, again, giving a solution to a potential problem or at least a perceived problem. Knowing about access to work, these government grants, knowing that it isn't going to cost the organization a single penny, because if they apply for it within the first 6 weeks, it's completely free. These are the things which can help take any of these doubts or concerns that an employer may have. I don't think they're out to discriminate us, but they may not have all the information to hand. By being able to supply that information in a positive light, which even takes that stress off of them, which they're probably busy. If you did find today interesting and you want to learn more, and we've got so many videos talking about how to find an inclusive employer, reasonable adjustments, the type of technology that you have access to, there are many more areas you can dive into. I've spoken a lot today about being informed and about knowing what support could benefit you. But how are you going to know this stuff? Look at these videos and I'm sure you'll find some answers or some things that you think maybe could help. We've also got a Facebook group and it's a great community where if you have any concerns or things you just want to talk about, it's a great place to go to. We have a LinkedIn community, which is for more professional settings, which sounds to be quite relevant for most people here. We also have online tests. If you're not officially diagnosed, maybe do these. They're a really good way of getting an idea about the characteristics that are attached to certain diagnoses. So you could go to an employer saying, even though it's not official, these are a lot of the characteristics and traits that I resonate with. As such, it tells them more. Rather than just saying, I got dyscalculia, what does that even mean? You're giving them a list of traits which you resonate with. And that might be more beneficial than just giving them a label or a name. Here is our lovely contact details if you want to reach out for more or find out more information. Anyway, that was a lot of information in a short amount of time, but I hope you've got a couple of little gems out of today. Cheers, Kate. Appreciate it. Oh, cheers, Clara. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it. Thank you all for the lovely comments. Very useful, very interesting. All right. Bye, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.